My name is Vivian Harlow, and before we begin, there's something you need to understand. I'm not the kind of woman most people would see as a threat. I'm 58, and I've been blessed with what people politely call good genes. Smooth skin that barely gives away my age. Auburn hair I keep neatly styled, and a figure that still turns heads when I walk into a room. I dress well, speak softly, and smile politely at family gatherings. But appearances, as they say, can be deceiving. The evening that changed everything began like so many others, with a family dinner I didn't want to attend. It was a Thursday in late October, and the leaves outside my son's suburban Ohio home had turned that brilliant gold people love about Midwestern autumns. I made the 20-minute drive from my house in the historic district, bringing a nice bottle of wine and my usual expression of polite interest in whatever domestic theater my daughter-in-law had planned. Sabrina had been married to my son for 12 years, and in all that time, she had never made me feel truly welcome in their home. Civil, yes, but never warm. She always called me Mrs. Harlow, never Vivian. Always asked about my health in a tone that suggested she hoped for bad news. There was something cold and calculated behind her pale blue eyes. Something I noticed the very first day Ethan brought her home to meet me. But today, there was something more. Attention. A sense of purpose. "Vivian, you look lovely as always," Sabrina said as she opened the door. Her smile was razor sharp. She's 34, but looks older, with harsh blonde hair and lips always drawn tight in some private disapproval. "My mother's already here." "Ah, yes, Carolyn Blake, Sabrina's mother, already seated in the living room like a queen awaiting her court. She's 72, a formidable woman with silver hair pulled into a severe bun, and a righteousness that came not from faith, but from pure, unshakable certainty. She had never liked me. I represented everything she disliked about my generation. Too independent, too financially comfortable, too unwilling to defer to her sense of authority. "Vivian," she said, remarkably, using my first name for once. "How wonderful of you to join us for our special family dinner." Special? That word again. It was the third time I'd heard it, first when Sabrina called to invite me. It gave me a chill. "Thank you for having me," I said, settling into the same uncomfortable armchair they always gave me, the one with the broken spring that made a graceful sit-down nearly impossible. Ethan came out from the kitchen, my handsome 36-year-old son, who had grown from a sweet boy into a man who let his wife and mother-in-law run his life. He kissed my cheek with genuine warmth, the only one in that house who still seemed to love me, though even that had begun to feel strained. "Mom, you look great. How are you feeling?" "The same as yesterday, sweetheart." "And the day before that." I looked closely at his face, the dark circles under his eyes, the way his hands trembled just slightly when he thought no one was watching. "And you?" "He's just under a lot of stress at work," Sabrina answered for him, appearing over his shoulder like a possessive shadow. "We all are. That's why we wanted to have this dinner. There's something important we need to talk about, something that involves all of us." I didn't get the chance to ask what she meant before my 17-year-old granddaughter, Madeline, came down the stairs. She used to be my little princess, the wide-eyed girl who loved to spend weekends at my house and begged me to tell her stories about Grandpa Robert and our lives before she was born. But teenagers change, and Madeline had changed more than I ever expected. Over the past 2 years, she'd grown distant, almost hostile. Tonight she looked pale and uneasy. Her dark hair hung limp around a face that should have still glowed with youth. "Hi, Grandma," she said softly, not quite meeting my eyes. "Hi, sweetheart. You look tired. Everything okay?" "She's fine," Sabrina cut in before Madeline could respond. "Just a lot of schoolwork, you understand?" But I didn't understand, because no one told me anything about Madeline's life anymore. Invitations to school plays and matches had stopped arriving. Weekend visits were always, maybe next time. The girl who once called me every few days just to talk had become a stranger who could barely look at me. "Dinner's ready," Sabrina announced cheerfully, with a brightness that sounded forced. "I made your favorite, Vivian. Roast beef with all the fixings." She never asked what I liked. I actually preferred lighter meals these days. But I followed the family into the dining room without a word. The table was set with Sabrina's best china, another signal that this dinner was more than just a casual get-together. We sat down, Ethan at the head of the table, Sabrina to his right, Carolyn to his left. I was across from Sabrina, of course, and Madeline at the far end, quiet as a shadow. The roast beef was perfectly pink, the potatoes creamy, the green beans crisp. It all looked like a magazine photo. Too perfect, too staged. There was small talk at first. Carolyn spoke about her bridge club and her upcoming trip to Florida. Sabrina bragged about some promotion she was expecting at work. Ethan chimed in here and there, but he seemed distracted, his eyes darting toward Madeline and then quickly away again. Madeline didn't speak. She picked at her food, her fork barely making a sound. Finally, as the plates began to clear and the dessert, an overly sweet cherry pie, was brought out, Sabrina cleared her throat in that performative way of hers. "There's something we need to discuss," she said, folding her napkin neatly and placing it on the table. "As a family." That phrase, "as a family." It always meant something unpleasant was coming, and that Sabrina expected everyone to agree with her by default. Ethan looked down at his plate. Carolyn sat up straighter. Madeline froze. I stayed still. Sabrina continued, "We've been thinking a lot about the future, about responsibilities, about what's best for everyone, especially for Madeline." My heart gave a slight lurch. "Madeline is going to be 18 soon," she said, "and we've been considering the next steps for her. College, housing, financial aid, that kind of thing." "I assume she'll be living on campus?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Sabrina gave a tight smile. "Well, yes, eventually. But in the meantime, we were thinking it might make sense for her to move in with you." The room went quiet. I blinked. "I'm sorry. What?" "Just for a while," Sabrina said quickly, as though speeding through. "It would make it sound more reasonable. You've got the space, and with Robert gone, it might be good for you to have the company. And honestly, with everything we have going on here, it's getting harder to give her the attention she needs." Madeline's eyes were wide now. She looked like she wanted to disappear. "I see," I said slowly. "So this is about convenience." "No, it's about what's best," Carolyn chimed in, her voice firm. "You're not working, Vivian. You have the time. And this would be an opportunity for you to contribute, really contribute to the family." I looked from one face to another. Ethan wouldn't meet my eyes. Madeline looked like she might cry. Sabrina looked smug. I took a breath. "You want to send your daughter away," I said, "because she's inconvenient, and you're dressing it up as some noble plan." Sabrina's smile vanished. "That's not fair," Ethan mumbled. "It's not like that." "No?" I asked. "Then what's it like, Ethan? Explain it to me." He hesitated. Sabrina jumped in. "You always said you wanted to be closer to her. This is your chance." At that moment, Madeline stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. She looked at me, really looked at me, and whispered, "Please." It wasn't a question. It wasn't even a request. It was a cry. And I understood. "All right," I said. "She can come." Sabrina let out a breath of relief. Carolyn nodded, satisfied. But as I looked at Madeline, I knew something was wrong. Something deeper than stress or school. Something they weren't telling me. And I promised myself I'd find out what it was. Madeline moved in 3 days later. I prepared the guest room, fresh sheets, her favorite books from when she was younger stacked neatly on the nightstand, a soft new blanket folded at the foot of the bed. I even placed a vase of yellow tulips on the windowsill, remembering how she used to say they looked like sunshine. She barely spoke the first night. She came in carrying just one suitcase, her shoulders hunched, her hoodie pulled up like armor. I offered to help her unpack. She declined. I made her tea. She didn't drink it. We watched one episode of a baking show on the couch in silence before she mumbled goodnight and disappeared into the guest room. I didn't press her. I let her have space. The second day, I cooked her pancakes. She ate them wordlessly. The third day, I suggested we take a walk. She nodded, and we walked the block without a single word between us. But on the fourth night, everything changed. It was past midnight. I was up reading when I heard a sound, soft, broken. I followed it down the hallway to her door. It was slightly ajar. She was sitting on the floor, knees drawn to her chest, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, sweetheart," I said gently, kneeling beside her. "What is it?" She didn't look at me at first, just shook her head. But then her voice cracked. "I didn't want to come here because I'm tired of them," she said. "I came because I was scared." That chilled me. Scared of what? She hesitated, then whispered, "Of what they might do next." I didn't push for more. I just held her. But inside, alarm bells were blaring. The next day, I started paying closer attention. I checked her belongings while she was at school. Not to invade her privacy, to protect her. That's when I found the folder tucked at the bottom of her suitcase. It was filled with printouts, emails, bank statements, legal documents, and a letter, half-written, tear-stained, addressed to whoever finds this. I sat down and read every word. By the time I finished, my hands were shaking. Because what Madeline had uncovered wasn't just family tension. It was betrayal, manipulation, control. Sabrina and Carolyn had been systematically isolating her, from her friends, from her activities, from me. They had filed paperwork to gain full financial control over her college fund, without telling her. They had even drafted an emancipation petition, positioning themselves as her legal guardians well into adulthood for her own protection. It was a calculated move, not out of love, out of greed. And Ethan had signed it all. I couldn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea gone cold, staring at the folder on the table, trying to wrap my mind around it. The signatures were real, the dates lined up, the intentions were unmistakable. They weren't planning to guide Madeline through adulthood. They were planning to control her. Every step, every dollar, every decision. And worst of all, they were making her believe she had no choice. The next morning, I waited until she came down for breakfast. She looked exhausted, shadows under her eyes, her posture guarded. "Sit with me," I said. She did, reluctantly. "I read the papers," I said softly. "The ones in your suitcase." Her eyes filled instantly with tears, but she didn't speak. "I'm not angry," I added quickly. "I'm relieved that you trusted me enough to bring them, and heartbroken that you've been carrying this alone." Still silent, but her chin trembled. "I'm going to help you," I told her, "whatever it takes." That's when she broke. The tears came fast, full body sobs as she leaned into me like she did when she was small. I held her the way I used to, gently, firmly, with every ounce of strength I had. "I didn't know who else to turn to," she whispered. "They make me feel crazy, like I'm ungrateful, like I'm the problem." "You're not," I said. "They are?" That day, we got to work. I contacted my attorney, a woman named Lena Foster, sharp as a scalpel and twice as precise. I explained the situation, showed her the documents, and asked what could be done. She reviewed everything and looked up at me with a grim expression. "This isn't just manipulation," she said. "It borders on coercion. And depending on how they accessed her financial records, it may be fraud." I felt a spark of hope. We started building a case. Meanwhile, I encouraged Madeline to keep a journal, to record every interaction, every threat, every moment she felt pressured or afraid. We scanned the documents, filed reports, and began quietly gathering statements from teachers, counselors, even neighbors. And through it all, I kept smiling politely when Sabrina called to check in. I didn't tell her anything, not yet, but I knew a storm was coming, and this time I would be ready. 2 weeks later, Sabrina showed up at my doorstep without warning. She had that icy smile on her face, the one she used when she was pretending not to be furious. "Vivian," she said brightly, "how's our girl doing?" I stepped aside and let her in, my own expression calm. "She's fine. Settling in, eating well, sleeping better." "Good," she said, glancing around the house like she was appraising it. "I just wanted to check in, make sure everything's going smoothly. You know how teenagers can be." I said nothing. She moved into the living room and sat on the edge of the couch, legs crossed, fingers twitching on her knee. A nervous tic she tried to hide. "Has Madeline mentioned anything unusual?" she asked, voice light. I tilted my head. "Unusual?" "You know, mood swings, paranoia. She can get dramatic sometimes." There it was, the setup. They weren't just trying to control her finances. They were trying to build a narrative that she was unstable, that they were the ones keeping her safe. I smiled. She seems perfectly sane to me. Sabrina's eyes narrowed just slightly. Well, that's good to hear, she said, because we were thinking it might be time for her to come back home. We've given everyone space, but ultimately, we're still her parents. I raised an eyebrow. She's not a child anymore. And you're not her parents, I said flatly. You're her mother and her grandmother, legally speaking. But that doesn't give you ownership. Her mask slipped for a second, just long enough for the sharp edge beneath to flash through. You're making a mistake, Vivian, she said, voice low. No, I replied. You did, when you underestimated how much I loved that girl. Sabrina stood, smoothing her skirt. I'm afraid this is going to get messy. Then wear something washable, I said. She left without another word. That evening, I found Madeline sitting in the backyard, knees drawn to her chest, hoodie pulled up again. She came, didn't she? She asked without turning. She did. Did she threaten you? I sat beside her on the bench. She tried. It didn't work. Madeline was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, Are you scared? The legal process took months. There were hearings, filings, sleepless nights. Madeline had to speak in front of a judge, recounting things no 17-year-old should have to say about their own family. But she did it, with a steady voice and a spine of steel. Sabrina and Carolyn fought back. They hired attorneys, made claims, tried to paint me as manipulative, Madeline as mentally unwell, Ethan as caught in the middle. But we had evidence, we had timelines, we had truth. And truth, in the end, was louder than all their rehearsed lies. The court granted Madeline full legal autonomy on her 18th birthday, just weeks before she started college. The financial hold they had tried to establish was severed. Her college fund was transferred into her name, with oversight by a neutral third party until she turned 21. Sabrina and Carolyn were furious. Ethan looked gutted, not because he lost, but because I think, deep down, he knew he had betrayed his daughter, and now he would have to live with that. The day after the ruling, Madeline and I went out for ice cream. It was silly, almost childish, a small ritual we used to share when she was little. She got mint chip. I got butter pecan. We sat on a park bench as the sun dipped low, casting warm orange light across the grass. She licked her spoon thoughtfully and said, You saved me. I looked at her and smiled. No, I said, you saved yourself. I just reminded you that you could. She nodded. Still, I wouldn't have made it without you. I didn't reply right away, because part of me wanted to cry. Another part wanted to go back in time and hold that little girl who once ran through my hallway in fairy wings and sneakers, before anyone taught her to doubt herself. Instead, I said, You're going to be okay. And she was. She is. Today, Madeline is in her second year of college. She's studying psychology, go figure, and wants to work with teens who've experienced emotional abuse. She still comes home on weekends, still calls me Graham when she's sleepy, still asks me to make her pancakes when she's stressed. As for me, I still go to family dinners, just not theirs. I thought about that. No, I said finally, because for the first time in a long time, I know exactly what I'm fighting for.